Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Deez. This is my workshop. Let's get on to a Messin' in the Shop episode. The first thing we're going to tackle in this episode is going to be this. What is this? This is a deck lid for like a trunk, specifically in a Ford Focus. And it's kind of a safety or a privacy device that adds a shelf to cover what's in. It's a hatchback car. So if you go and look in the back of a car, you can see what's in the trunk. Well, in a hatchback, sometimes you want, if you go shopping or something, you want to kind of conceal the items you have just so they're not visible to the public, to discourage theft and that sort of thing. It's a fiberglass sheet with just some stuff glued to it, fuzzy stuff. Problem, there's two mechanisms on the side, two little U-joints, and this one is busted off, as you can see. So we need to kind of make one. It's not going to be pretty. I just want to make this functional again so that the person who owns this can use it in their car and have a little bit of privacy back in their car again. We're going to either use this chunk of plastic, nylon, or this thinner piece. And I'm not going to try to get too fancy with this. We're just going to glue it to the side of this and just try to shore up this area here because it's kind of mangled up. So let's do the best we can. Warning, this is not going to be a pretty fix. It's just going to be get the job done fix. So let's get started and see if we can't figure something out. First thing we want to do is kind of get some measurements. This particular piece of plastic here it flexes a little bit, but regardless, it's a little thinner at the top than it is on the base, and it's just to kind of snap in and keep the dowels that are in the vehicle from just popping off of there. I don't think that'll be too hard to recreate. We'll just drill a larger hole on the bottom, and then we'll cut a thinner section at the top. The piece of plastic we use should flex just enough to make it work. So let's go ahead and measure how wide that is. 430 thou at the top, and the bottom is 471 thou. So I don't think it's terribly crucial, but we have 430 and 471. Let me write that down. So here's what we're going to use. We're going to use a 7/16 and a 15/32 drill. The 7/16 is going to be the upper portion, although it's a little bit smaller yet. I think that's going to be fine. And the larger one is going to be on the bottom, which is going to work out just fine. You see how that works in the car. Little bit of friction. Let's go ahead and check out the other side and see if we're going to use this thicker material or this thinner piece here. Probably go with this thinner piece. So as you can see, this is all really mangled. What I'm going to do is just use super glue and just try to get everything is just kind of glued and tacked back together. Doesn't have to be perfect. But then we have this piece, which I'm thinking if we just mount this vertically here, maybe clip this corner so it can get in a little bit tighter. We'll just glue it on to this material so it'll stay in place and it'll provide some support for this area back here. Otherwise, we got this piece, which I think is thicker, but I don't think that's necessary to be this thick. So we're going to use this piece here. Let me do some measurements of the other one, and we'll cut out our blank, or at least scribe a line, mount this thing in here. I just scribed a little mark there at the top of that. That's how I'm gonna, doesn't matter if it's a little longer. Go in there. Good. So we got our mark there for the bigger drill. Start with this one, and then we'll drill the smaller hole above it, and then we'll just cut that out. That fits pretty good. Good enough anyway. So that fits down in there. And we'll glue that on. But before we do that, I'm going to go out and make sure this fits on the car. And then we'll come back in and finish this out. Well, I tested this and it fits just fine. It lines up in here good enough. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue this on here. And I'm just going to use some cheap super glue. And we'll see how well it holds. If it doesn't hold well, then I'll look into using some, let me get a poker. I'll use maybe some screws or something and washers to kind of hold that together. Okay. Good. More here. That's pretty good. Where's it? Well, that's on there. We're going to let this dry, see how it's holding up before we go put it in the car. If it's holding up well, we'll go see what it looks like in the car. Well, I think maybe we have this patched up. This is a very rudimentary fix. This is crude. It is not very professional, but I don't care. This car is old. I just need this thing to work so that there's some privacy for putting things in this trunk. But let's go down here and look at this fix. Super glue seems to be holding up well enough. It's pretty solid on there. I mean, it isn't perfect. I don't want to buy a new one of these. I mean, I could start haberdashing a bunch of crap in here, but I think this is going to hold. Let's go out to the vehicle and see how this thing fits. We'll find out. Here's the original part. Seems to be like a two-piece thing that just kind of snaps on there. It certainly has more flex, but you know, I don't want to buy anything for this car. Well, as you can see, it's just a peg that part slips onto. Let's go ahead and put this thing in here. It does. There's the fixed piece. Hopefully that holds up. It'll flex a little. Here's the original. Now we just need to clamp in these other pieces. They go here. One. And here it is. The other. Now, seems to be holding. I think that does it. Well, that was a very crude fix for that deck lid security privacy cover for the Ford Focus, but the whole thing's actually cracked. It's cracked in the center on the side that had the good bracket. It's actually cracked, so even when you shut it, that one pops out. For the most part, it's better than it was. The car is mostly going to be parked in a public setting, and you know, if there's going to be things in there, some personal property, we just need to conceal it so people don't get tempted to steel things. So there's that project. It's done. Let's move on to that next thing. So I'm told this is accurate to 4/10,000ths. Extremely precise rod. It doesn't say. It is a chrome plated carbon rod. It's a very precise rod. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. The whole idea of this is so that I can center up my lathe chuck and tailstock, and I can actually face the ends of this off and put a center drill in and actually get my lathe turned in and tuned in a little more accurate than I'm able to do today. I don't own anything that is very precise, that has any length to it at all. So this is going to be really handy for that. I can also use it on the mill as well. But for those applications where I'm going to need something really precise, this is supposed to be able to help me get everything kind of tuned in and dialed in where precision really matters. This was a gift, and I'm looking forward to using it. Let's take a look at it. Let's take the packaging off here. All of that plastic off of there. Now the ends are rough cut. They're shiny, but you can feel a burr on the ends of these, so I will need to chamfer them and turn those down. But there it is, the chrome rod, 1/2 inch. Let's go ahead and check it with the micrometer. Let's see how we're looking out here on the end. Well, that says 510 thou and 4 thou over. So if that's supposed to be a 1/2 inch, it is not. Let's check the center. There's also 510 thou, and that is 5/10, 5105. So that is a 1/10 difference in the center. That is 510 thou and 4/10. So both ends of this, it's within a 1/10 for sure. So this is very accurate. So if I'm measuring and using a dial test indicator or dial indicator, it's only a 1/10 difference. I'll measure the center again, but this end and this end are both 510 thou and 4/10. Let's check the center one more time. 510 and 5/10. So, yep. So I verified it twice. The center is 510 thou and 5/10. And each end is 510 thou and 4/10. Maybe that's from when the variation is when they cut the ends and heat, or I mean we're talking tenths. Like, it's not very much different. This is very, very accurate. But it's not 500 thou. It's not 1/2 inch. It's 510 thou. So I'll contact who sent this to me and ask if it was supposed to be 510 thou, but that's very interesting. In a later video, we will use this in the lathe for sure, maybe the mill if I could figure out how to do that. We do want to face off these ends and clean those up, chamfer them, and it will be really nice to have a known reference source to be able to tram in those lathe chucks. If we just check the center of this rod, we are coming up with 1/2 inch, so 510 thou and 5/10. In between I think it's 5/10. So 510 thou, 5/10. Let's check both ends. That's 510 thou and 4/10. Hopefully you can see that. So 510 thou and 4/10. And we'll check this other end. 510 thou and 4/10. 510 thou and 4/10. Very interesting. So I'm hoping that this was intended to be 510 thou, so 1/2 inch, 10 thou. And it is almost a 1/2 tenth, or 5/10. So 510 thou and 5/10 for the whole rod. But each end is 4/10. So maybe that's from, these are rough cut ends. You can feel the burr on that. Perhaps that is from cutting it, but it is very accurate. We're only talking 1/10 between the center and the ends, but it does have a 1/10 discrepancy with this micrometer. Now maybe this isn't accurate enough to read it, but it is showing 1/10 off. I'm gonna ignore this, but again, it looks like I'm 1/10 off. So I'm curious, was this supposed to be 510 thou, or was it supposed to just be straight 1/2 inch? Very interesting, but thank you nonetheless. This is going to be useful. It is very, very accurate, and there's very little difference between one end and the other over a 12-inch span. Both ends are 510 thou and 4/10, according to the Fowler, and the center is 510 thou and 5/10. So just a 1/10 fatter, if you will. Anyway, thank you. Looking forward to using it. I'm sure many of you have seen one of these things. Several years ago, there was a craze when our kids were little, but when they were little, these hoverboards came out. And if you remember, the really cheap ones, the knockoffs, were actually setting fire to people's homes. We actually had an acquaintance who left it plugged in, and the cheap ones did not have all the protection and all the things built into the charging systems, and they would actually set fire. This actually happened to one of our friends who had this thing plugged in. It wasn't this brand, it wasn't Razor brand. It was just a generic knockoff that came from China. And there was a big problem with this stuff. Then these things were just popping up all over the place, and it was really a cool technology. I don't know the history of all this, but I do remember, if you remember, there was that company that came out with the Segways. You know, you see Segway tours in large cities like Chicago or any of those places. Well, they developed this technology that actually lets these like two-wheeled devices balance. If this thing had power, it would just balance itself. So there's sensors in here. There's ways that this thing can just balance itself. It's quite an interesting piece of technology. But the Segways the whole design of those were to be for metropolitan areas and really solve the traffic problem in the United States in these large metropolitan areas. Those Segways still exist. A lot of places use them in warehouse environments. There's a lot of tours in like downtown Chicago or other large cities where they do Segway tours. So you get on one of these things, put a helmet on. It's not one of these, by the way. A Segway actually has a handle, like a handle for you to hold on to, so you're not just balancing without your hands being held on to something. A little more control. But then these things came out. People kind of stole that technology and started making these hoverboards, these two-wheeled devices where you could stand on it, and based on how you tilt, you can actually turn, and it was quite fascinating. My youngest was really good with this thing. He could just zip all over the place. I tried it one time. I didn't fall off, but I was like, that's it. I don't need to fall off. So I never messed with it. All right, long story short, we've had this thing for 10 years. It's been a really long time. We've long lost the charger, and I decided, you know what, let's just get rid of this thing. I believe it would still function if we had the charger. I don't want this thing. These things are all over the place now. But what I am interested in is it's heavy. And there's aluminum on the sides, on the wheels, and on the inside. So I don't know how much aluminum is in this thing, but I might be able to use them as is and turn them down, or maybe melt them down with my forge when I get into that. So this segment of messing in the shop is going to be tearing apart this thing and recycling the parts we don't need and reusing the parts that we can. If you're curious, this is the battery that came out of it. I'm going to recycle that thing, get rid of it. Again, it was stuck in there. I couldn't hardly get it out. But I think it's best, rather than me trying to fix this thing and resurrect it and charge it different ways. I'm sure I could hook something to this and charge it manually. I want to get rid of this thing. If you're screaming at the screen, you're like, no, you should fix that thing. I'm not interested in that. I want to get rid of this thing. Let's tear this thing apart and see how these things work. Hopefully you're interested in that kind of thing. Let's get started. I thought I would back up and just, I read on the internet, I thought, oh, maybe I can charge this thing. It's not recommended, it's not safe to do, but you can use like a DC power supply to charge things. I'm not an electrician, I'm not an expert in this kind of stuff, so I really don't want to burn my house down, so that's why I don't want to attempt this. But one thing I did read is once these lithium-ion batteries are completely dead, 0 volts, you can't recover them. They're done. And the general consensus is if 2 years or longer you haven't, it'll end up draining down to where there's no voltage, and then you can't recover these. Now, I'm sure some people have had success recovering these batteries, but I just thought I would go ahead and check it before we disassemble everything. Let's go ahead and check it and see where we're at. So here's a standard AA battery. If we look at the voltage, if you can see that, this battery's, I don't know, 580 or half, well, it's not 1 volt, but 580 millivolts, I don't know. Well, it's reading 580 on there. I'm not an electrician. What else we got? Here's a battery. I don't know what this one's. There, 1.2, 1.3. I think that's pretty standard for these. Yeah, 1.2 volts. So this battery is good. This one, maybe it's only 600 volts. Or, no, it's supposed to be 1.5. So I would say this battery is dead. Anyway, if we look at the voltage on this is all DC. It's reading at virtually nothing. It's 0.07, 0.06, and dropping. 0.06, 0.0, it just keeps dropping. So I'm going to conclude that this is virtually dead, and maybe it's recoverable. I'm sure some of you experts out there would know, but I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to burn the house down. It's just not worth it to me, and I want to get this hunk of thing out of here. Short of clipping these wires off here, there's some roll pins in here that might be keeping this together. Now, I'm not exactly sure. They're not through. They don't go all the way through. There's also this pin here, I assume, is part of it. Well, there is some... Okay. So this pin here, that keeps it stopped. So that's a stop pin. Probably also keeps it from coming out. So if we get this pin out, I think half of it will come out. Well, I'm going to stop the video here and get these out because I'm probably going to have to drill and mess with it. If I get anything interesting, I'll record it. But this pin has to come out. That's holding this piece on, keeping it from spinning all the way around. And these two roll pins need to come out. I'll probably have to drill those out in order to get this to slide off. So that's what I'm working with right now. And I don't think that's going to make for much interesting video. Well, we've made quite the mess tearing this thing apart. I went ahead and put the other housing in the freezer. I'm going to see if I can get those needle bearings out of there. That's the last thing in, but this is all aluminum here. The wheels have aluminum. I want to tear into those here in a little bit. But before we really move forward, I want to clean this mess up. I got too many tools out. Now the area is cluttered. I need to get this cleaned up so we can keep working on it. We still need to take the wheels apart, get those needle bearings out, and then throw all this crap away. These are all just plastic housings. These things had a power switch. There's some LEDs in some of these where there was some lights on them. It's all just trash. So I'm gonna get all this cleaned up, and then we're gonna come back down here and focus and continue cleaning things up. What I decided to do with these roller bearings, when I go to melt these, I'm gonna use a hammer and I'll just break the aluminum housing here, because I'm just gonna melt these down anyway, and I'll get the bearings out at that time. Well, these are all copper. I'm pretty sure I scraped a few of them, and that you can see on the edges it's got that red color of copper. So I'm gonna toss those in the copper melt pile, and I know there's some dirt and crap that will have to float out of there, but you know, if I'm gonna be melting, I might as well toss these in too. Got these pieces of aluminum out of there. So we can go ahead and put this stuff in the recycle. Now, let's get these wheels apart. brought you down here and forgot to hit record. Well, we got these popped out of there. Here's a bush. Here's the bearing. They popped out. There was a kind of like a dust seal backed up with a little aluminum ring, and all of that just popped out of there. I think this aluminum ring might have actually been part of this and broke off. Doesn't matter. But we did get that out of there. My socket is almost stuck. It'll come out of there. A little bit of wiggle. There we go. So there's the two side pieces ready to go. We'll go ahead and throw these in for the melt too. And here's the two bearings. Now, these bearings are damaged because I pressed on the inner race, so they're no good. I wouldn't trust them for anything, so I wouldn't use them, but I'll keep them for reference and label them so I don't use them. I don't know why I would. Use the little dake, got those out of there, and now let's get the rest of this cleaned up and we'll go on to the wheels. Tell you what, this little hoverboard is taking forever to tear apart. There's a lot of parts and pieces to it. It's really interesting. That may be the main focus of this messing in the shop. It's just taking so long, but it really is fascinating how they made these things. A lot of work went into it, engineering, but it's pretty neat. We still got some bearings. Not sure how I'll get those out because they're blind bearings. I'd have to either break this or pry them out somehow. I'm gonna see if I can get these magnets off. They're pretty strong magnets for the motors and all that, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can chip these out of here without breaking as many as possible, and then stack them up, and I'll have them for future projects. Magnets are really handy when you're making different things. So let's go ahead and see if we can get these magnets out of here, then we'll continue on. We got them out of there. They're a little bit sticky. Some glue on them. There's like sticky residue. Must be how they assembled it. I think one of these did break, so I want to get that out of there. I'm trying to keep. These are some tough magnets, but I'm trying to keep all the ones that are not broken together, and I'll probably just throw away the broken ones. I just don't need all these around. Magnets can be kind of a dangerous thing if you're not careful with them. You can pinch your fingers. It's just, you got to be careful when you're dealing with strong magnets like that. There's sharp pieces on them. You don't want to get that embedded in your skin, anything like that, but That right there is a pretty strong stack of magnets. What a mess. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and throw these away. I don't need that many magnets laying around, and I don't need shards of them either. What do we have? We got rubber to get off of here. And then we have a bearing, and that's basically it. I may take the copper out of these. I'm not going to do it in this video. It's just be picking copper out of there. But I'll probably get the copper out of these and throw it with the copper, because I want to do a copper melt and aluminum melt. Might as well take the copper out of these. I went this far. Now I need to get this rubber out somehow. I wonder what the trick is for that. Well, if I can get underneath there, I think I can pry it off. Let's see. There we go. Maybe this won't be so bad. There we go. I think that's it. They just will slide off. If I actually had couple blocks, maybe I'll get my 1, 2, 3 blocks. And pretty solid rubber wheel there. And there is that aluminum. You know, I may not melt this down. I might actually turn this down and make something out of it if I can. Well, I know I could get that in the lathe if I do the inside. I don't know, we'll see. Could make a container or something out of that, clean it up. I don't know, we'll see. I do need to get this bearing out of here. Let's get this other rubber off first. That could make a really nice no-spill oil pot. Pretty interesting. Now, how do we get these bearings out of here? Let me think about this and see if I can get one of these out. Well, everybody, we're going to close out this little segment here of tearing down this Razor hoverboard. It is quite interesting. There's a lot of really cool components. It seems that brand of these hoverboards was built very well, at least in my opinion. I'm no expert. A lot of components to this thing jam-packed into that little scooter. Very heavy, a lot of aluminum. I'm going to add that to the melt pile, get to that someday. I've still got a few more things to break down, but for the purpose of this video, I think it's broken down enough for you to get the idea of what's inside one of these things. We do have some copper off the motors. Some of you probably would have, rather seen me resurrect this thing or do something different with it. I'm not an engineer. I don't have that kind of a creative mind. I just like to see what makes things tick and how they're built. And this thing was destined for the trash anyway. And, kids are grown up. They don't use this thing. If we want to get another one, we'll buy a new one, or it would need to be something different. So I wanted to tear it apart, salvage the parts that I felt you were useful, and share it with you to see if any of you were curious. You can also see what's inside of this thing. I think in a later video, I'm going to kind of make some containers out of this. I'll try to clean these up. These are the wheel hubs. The thickness of the bottom or this portion is maybe 400, 300 thou. It's not incredibly thick. But I think what I'm going to have to do, I don't have a bearing puller or anything like that. I think I'm going to put this in the mill and maybe take an end mill and just take off this. There's an inner hub inside of here where the bearing goes. I may chew away at this so I can get that bearing out, and then just carve out and clean up this nub here so I have a flat bottom. In addition to that, I may clean up this outside so it's nice and flat. I'm not sure how I'll be able to turn this in the lathe. Now I can turn it like this, so I can clean this side, this face up, because I can mount it with the jaws that way. But my jaws don't get big enough. I'll just have to see what options I have on the lathe. Otherwise, I'll use the mill. I don't know. It'll be interesting anyway to see what I can do with these. So I'll probably do some turning later on with these. Later, I'll tear these apart. I won't do any of that on camera, but I will turn these on camera someday. These are the wheels, just big hunks of solid rubber. I don't know what I'll do with those. Probably trash them. And a lot of hardware, some screws, things like that. I'll probably put this in a tray or something and keep them. Never know. A couple extra bearings and a ton of super, super strong magnets. These things are very, very strong. I broke 5 or 6 of them trying to get them out, but most of them came out intact. I'm going to hang on to these. I got them all stacked up here. You got to be careful with these. It's very powerful. You can pinch yourself very easily. I'm going to set those aside. Who knows what kind of project I may do in the future. You've seen me use magnets before with certain projects where I want to attach them to machinery, and I'm sure I'll come up with something later on. That's really it. Of course, there's a battery. I'll dispose of this properly as well. That's the end of it. It was really interesting to see what's inside here. I hope you enjoyed that little messing in the shop clip. Let's get on to that next thing.